Hello, everyone. We want to welcome you to our webinar today. Joining us is Desiree Gigear from Innovia Consulting, and she has a couple of her support team members with her as well, Daniel Palmer and Holly Kudel. Des and her team will be presenting on how to modify or not modify your NAV BC system. And I know you're all eager to get started on this presentation. So before I pass it over to Des and her team, I just want to remind you that we are recording this webinar as well as all of our webinars, and it will be posted to our on-demand webinar library for you to review and share with anyone. And if you do have any questions, please feel free to type those into the questions panel at the bottom of your webinar control panel, and we will get them addressed at the end of our session. And if you would like, you can unmute yourself towards the end, and you can address your questions on your own or type them in yourself. So now I'll pass it on over to Des to kick off our presentation.
Cool. Thank you very much. Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. Thank you very much for your time this afternoon. The topic that I want to cover today is to modify or not to modify your NAV or Business Central system. As we just said, we're going to open it up at the end to have a nice discussion. I want this to kind of be an informal discussion on the pros and cons, the cost of ownership, repercussions, things you should consider as you in your business approach deciding whether or not to make changes in your ERP system or in your NAV or Business Central system. And so today I have with me, if I can learn to flip the pages here, I'm Desiree Gigear. I'm an application consultant, and I've been in the Dynamics industry for about 20 years on the ISV side, on the partner side. And I also have with me Holly Kudel, and I'm hoping that she can bring to the table today her perspective of being a team lead on the customer side. And Daniel, he's one of our development consultants, and I want him to kind of represent any of the technical questions we might get, as well as just from a technical perspective, some of the considerations and repercussions as you decide you want to make a change. Holly, Daniel, do either of you want to say hello?
Hello, thanks for having me join, Des. And like you said, I did come from 10 years on the user side, heading up a NAV team. And so there were a lot of discussion around when and how and why to modify, and hope we can bring some of that to light to some of our clients and some of the others that are listening in today.
Hey, you guys, I am Daniel Palmer. I've been a NAV developer for about 3 to 4 years now. Came from a development background before that. I have quite a lot of experience supporting NAV software, and my experience is really in break fixes and working through code that other people have written a long time ago. So I have some good perspective on when not to modify the system.
Cool. All right. So hey, cool. Guess what? You bought a system and you can modify that system. It's one of the coolest things about NAV or Business Central. It's also, it's one of the best things, and it's one of the worst things about Business Central is that it can be changed. It can be edited and modified. One of the things that we see a lot of during initial installations is the upfront frenzy of trying to get the new system to kind of look like the old system. And when you feel the project moving in that direction, you know, I pose to you, you did an RFQ for a reason. The product checked the boxes or most of your success criteria. Use the features out of the box that kind of helped make the decision to buy it in the first place. Because your business needs will evolve, so allow your system and your business needs to sort of evolve together.
Right. You know, one of the things I saw a lot of, Desiree, when people were building and when we were building our new systems was bringing things forward, carrying things from the past forward, and really encouraging the teams to champion those modifications and changes in the system. Why are we going to bring them forward? Give me good reasons. Share with me how. What does that do for you? What's the purpose of it before we bring them forward into the system, or add them if it's something new, because so many times we would bring things from the past because we think we need them or have to have them, and find out that we don't. And maybe they're causing trouble or more modifications because we brought them forward rather than just leaving them out.
Right, right. And you'll see at the tail end too, a few things to do after you do change a system, and that is to document all your changes and then reevaluate those changes, even if you're not embarking on an upgrade or a hotfix or a re-implementation. It's just always good to revisit that list of mods just to make sure that they all still apply, and remove the ones that you don't need. So, good point. So, minor edits are expected, right? Your users are going to use the personalization options to change their experience, adding columns to pages and reports and stuff like that. Those are all pretty typical and expected. Also, the report edits, anybody who's been in the Business Central arena or NAV arena for very long, we all know that some of those reports that are out of the box are not very visually appealing, is what I'll say. So those kind of changes, we're not talking about those. Those are very much expected. So, the type of changes that should be avoided, or you should take a little bit of time to consider before, just approaching it, is changing the fundamental behaviors of the system. The underlying logic is kind of what I like to call it. So posting logic, inventory costing, changing the way a costing method produces its results, the requisition worksheet, the planning engine, the calculation differences and stuff like that, lot or serialization behaviors, or inbound inventory application between the inbound and the outbound transactions. Inventory availability calculations too. I mean, that's a good one, because a lot of times people say, I don't want it to include X or Y or Z. And they don't realize that that functionality is used in hundreds of different calculations throughout the system.
Yeah. Right, and that's one thing to keep in mind when you're doing modifications is your scope of impact. And so the examples here are they have a range from the posting logic that is frequently modified, but very carefully. That's a there's a lot that can go wrong there. There's a lot that's occurring in the posting. That being said, it is something that we modify, but again, very carefully. Some of the other points on here are inherently complex at best. And like you mentioned, with those inventory calculations, are used all over the place. And so some of these areas are really, if you can avoid touching them, you really should stay away. And at that point,
some of the things. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, if you're looking to modify these areas extensively, it's definitely worth looking into ISVs that might have what you're looking for already, if you're looking to completely rewrite how these areas are working.
Right.
Go down the path people have already gone down before.
Use someone else's code.
Exactly.
Don't try to reinvent the wheel, or use something that gets you farther along.
Right. And these are areas that you can really see a waterfall effect from modifying. Other areas as well, but these 5 definitely worth extra attention.
And I think the part that we're trying to get across to everybody is the repercussions of editing such areas. Like you said, it's inherently complex. We're talking about thousands of lines of code over a lot of years of development on Microsoft's part. And we're trying to avoid end user frustrations. I mean, if it becomes overly costly and we always have to revisit the mod, or it never seems to work perfectly, these are end user frustrations that we really want to avoid. So, and your partner can help you come up with a better solution, like finding a different ISV or finding another area of the system that gets you farther along. Adding new logic, developing something completely new, that's a little more acceptable, I would say. But again, to Daniel's point, let's look for someone who's already invented that wheel, an ISP, other areas of the system that can help with getting what you're looking for a little farther along than starting at zero.
Yeah, and potentially at a lower cost as well.
Oh yeah, right. Yep. Good. More risks that I thought were beneficial and to bring up is every change that we make to the system is an interruption to the business. Not to mention that we would want to, as a partner, we would want to consume somebody's time to do some analysis, and then Daniel or somebody's going to do a lot of the development, but then we're also going to need somebody from your side, the business's side, to do the testing. And then let's talk about deployment too. The cost of deployment, it's time consuming. Downtime is costly. We usually have to make those changes after hours or during, the business day. So any interruption to the business is, costly to your bottom line. So.
Not to
also,
mention when it comes time to upgrade as well, you'll have barring extensions, you'll have a cost to move these changes along to the next system as well.
Right.
Or sometimes not along to the next upgrade.
Right.
That can cost just as much, having to remove something from the system that's already there.
Before you upgrade it, before you move it. Yeah, because you have to move some code, not all code.
Exactly, and it's all a manual process, identifying what we need, what we don't need in terms of modifications that we're going to keep versus drop off.
Right.
Yep. And interruptions. The thing that I see a lot is it's one department that wants something, and so there's going to be a modification and a change, and they test their area out and they work with us, but the fallout becomes throughout the company and other departments. And so taking the time to spend with each department to make sure there's not risk in their area, that something that is being modified isn't going to affect them down the road. And then what does that testing look like to ensure that along the way? Those are all interruptions that are forgotten often and not even brought to the table until after something's in place. And then they realize that, oh, you know what, we didn't think it was going to affect them, but it does.
Right.
So I'm sure that they scope that out as part of what they're doing. I know for me, I had a team. So every department had somebody who was considered the point person. And when we did a modification, they were required to test in their area. So everything we did in the system, all processes were ran through before we said okay to the modification and moving it to production going forward, because it really does at the end of the day affect the whole business, no matter what it might be.
It does. Yeah. I mean, if we have to install something that, let's think about it, you change in the infrastructure of a sales order, one of the sales tables, sales header, sales lines. Well, I can't do that during normal business hours because there's a slew of people trying to get their job done. So then if I have to do it after hours, you know what I mean? Or if we, let's just put it in over lunchtime and somebody doesn't get out. Here again, we're going to lose people's attention, and, the end user's experience is becoming,
Right. And May have come from the customer service rep who's entering that order, right? But the salesperson looks at it for things on that sales order related to sales and maybe some reporting they pull from it. The shipping and receiving department may be utilizing it. A special ops group may be utilizing the sales order to do some activities before it ships out. Then it goes back to your accounting and your accounts receivable. If it happens to be a drop ship, now you've got purchasing involved in that sales order. From their side of the perspective. And so that one document and one change could potentially affect everyone in the company at some touch point throughout its life cycle. So, that one change needs to be looked at by everybody involved in what they might do that would touch that order. So it is an interruption. It does take time.
Yeah, that's a great point. And it actually reminded me of talking about testing between departments. Some of those areas we were looking at in one of the previous slides, the complex areas, we'll call them, areas that are used throughout the entire system, those inventory calculations. You need to, it's almost impossible to test certain areas thoroughly. And so that's another kind of asterisk on some of those really widely used and complicated areas is how do you guarantee that the change you made didn't cause an effect somewhere you're not expecting it. And
maybe if we don't use that part of the system today, but we use a different part of the system tomorrow, and that impact, what we did 2 years ago now impacts that same calculation that we weren't using when we put this mod in place. That's kind of what you're saying, right? Yeah.
Exactly.
Right. Dates, another area like that. You have planned shipping date and expected receipt date. And you think, oh, I don't need both of those. I'm just going to use this one. So we're going to repurpose planned shipping date. I'm just going to use the expected delivery date instead. And so we repurpose that, and you're thinking like it's only used by the sales department, right? And it's a customer field just, when I'm planning to ship it out of the building, but it's not. That date gets carried over to your shipping department, to inventory, over to your planning and procurement if you're running those requisition worksheets. Now you've totally befuddled that because it's a date that's used there. So all those fields in an ERP, it's live, it's active, and it's all
connected.
Everything's running together, and so you need to be very cautious. I suggest against ever repurposing a field or a column. If you needed another column, you're better to leave that one blank that you're not using and create a new one for what you do want to have. Same with the fields. You need a new date field? Great, let's create a new date field. Let's not repurpose one that you think you're never going to use.
Sure. Another thing that we see, because we're in the support team, is how common it is to spend a lot of effort and time and money on a mod when your users have either they weren't part of the decision, they don't know why it's there, they weren't consulted in the first place, so they create a workaround. It kind of leads into that next bullet point. So is it going to be used? You know what I mean? So a lot of times we will, get a new customer who's already deployed, but then there's new fields, new functionality. How's it supposed to work? I have no idea. I don't use that. I go here.
Right.
Yeah.
And having those areas modified that the users aren't aware of is harder to support than having modifications that the users are aware of.
Right. So getting user buy-in.
Right. And it's how we approach making that decision to make those changes in the first place. And we'll kind of cover, a little bit of what goes into, making the right decision and how to assemble that team in a little bit, but, avoid creating something that is, I'll say, an IT project, but the recipient is customer service and they were never consulted kind of thing. So is it going to be used? Are we sure it's going to be used? Does it have some longevity? So, and then, you know, I think we've driven this fact home, but the more changes that you make to a system, the more complex it becomes and the more costly it is to maintain. So, and if you didn't think those were enough risks, there are more. So, but we probably covered a lot of these, but you know, sometimes people want to add new tables, let's call it for integration reasons, for I want to track some of the same information from this external system in NAV or something to that effect. When we add new tables, you know, you got to consider the data growth, you know, or what kind of changes that you are making to different pages. And I know Daniel and I can understand the flow field technology. Everybody loves those flow fields, but they are great until they're kind of used and abused, you know, and until somebody wants to put them on a list, you know, master table list, and that master table doesn't, you know, all it does is continue to grow throughout time. And those flow fields are calculated on the fly every time a user accesses the page. If there's too many of them, all those calculations have to be recalculated when I access that page or when I'm scrolling with my mouse. And it's going to be a slower, as time goes on, a slower and slower response.
Right, and that's the first thing I look for. If I get a request from a customer who says this page takes a long time to open, that's the first thing I'll look for is, hey, maybe there's 50 custom flow fields on that page, and that can really bog you down.
Do you think a solution to that would be like fact boxes? Does that help ease the page?
So yeah, that's a good example, because for example, if you're looking at you know, a list page and you have a fact box on the right that has information for the record you have highlighted, it's going to calculate it just for the record you have highlighted. So that is a good option.
Instead of every single
and
record.
then of course make sure that the flow fields that you have are actually necessary. So, you know, if you have 50 of them, maybe only 30 of them are used. So that's kind of where I start. And then yeah, that's a good recommendation on the fact boxes as well.
Cool. Other risks, we know this, but you know, training costs, changing of staff members. Inovia does specialize in free agents, and a lot of the free agents we get, you know, the same person that went live with that product is either in a different department or has, you know, won the lottery, bought an island, and is now living the keeping the dream alive, you know. So it can be costly to try to re-educate why do we have the mod, what's it there for, and it becomes kind of like a game of telephone. You get just half a picture of the big picture, a little corner of the big picture of how it all started. So plus the cost of supporting some, you know, non-standard platforms. So let's think about Microsoft. Usually if there is a problem, Microsoft wants us to prove it in, you know, a standard NAV database first before they're going to try to support it. And then that stands for ISVs as well. So, and then, you know, another piece of this puzzle is that whole, if you do switch partners, supporting non-standard behavior that we don't have any documentation for, you know, there's a cost associated to it. You know, let's face it, there truly is. And we're all too familiar with that. So how to avoid that, though, is documenting it. And then, like you were saying earlier, Daniel, cost of upgrading and re-implementation, you know, we know that those are costs that are going to be associated, right?
Yeah, and if you do decide to go through with the modification after this, make sure you document it, because that is kind of the key. Is, you know, you switch partners and you have modifications to your system. How do they support that? You know, you need to train new users on how to use a piece of your system that's not standard, but you won't be able to find documentation online on how to use that. So you really need that documentation for your purposes and for ours.
Well,
Right.
and I think it's kind of standard for us to use design documents. And usually before we do any change, we will get that design document in front of the end user for sign off. So even saving those would be beneficial, right? Even if that's the only documentation you have, usually it has a little bit of information on why did we do it, what areas were changed.
Right.
Cool.
Taking a step back to the ISVs you mentioned, that just reiterates the whole fact that the modification affects everything. And, when they ask us to present them with a clean version with their product in it, without all this other stuff, so that they can walk through and see if there is something that's causing the error, the problem in the system, or a bug because of their product, they want to be able to isolate that. And, that just goes back to reiterating that fact that, when we change, when we make changes, it affects everything. And, that's the reason they're asking for that. So those changes are affecting the ISVs. They're affecting your base code. They're affecting other modifications. And it becomes more and more difficult to isolate things, the more changes and things that you add. So not that you shouldn't make changes or do customizations, but you need to make sure that they're the right decision, and they shouldn't just be, that, I went to the candy store with $100 and I can just buy, and have what I feel like having today. You need to really think about it and digest what is right for my company. Is this really something that's going to bring return on investment, that's going to really help me to move forward and to be better and more successful within our business processes, or is it just a wish list?
Right. Or for a particular employee that, doesn't want change. And so we're going to turn that field blue because they like blue. So that's good. That kind of leads into, so we've identified some of the risks, warnings of certain areas, risks of making changes, and all of that. So let's talk about the best approach to make some changes. And in my opinion, it starts within your business, and I'm going to ask you to add to this, Holly, but, evaluate the cost. What's the cost of not making a change? Do you know how much time is wasted on the process in question, or the whatever it is that you're trying to do? Is it truly worth the investment? Do you know what the return on investment is? Do you know if you have that cost and then you know how much a mod would take, and then do you know how long you would have to have it in production to realize you're a better bottom line? And having some of those details. Also, we talked about this a little bit, but who are the players? Who's going to use the mod? Who will be impacted? To your point earlier, Holly, if customer service is asking for something and I'm creating changes that's going to impact the GL, the chart of accounts, and I haven't notified, accounting, woo,
right? And I think that's the part that dropped off the most, is that impacted. What a great question. I think every mod should have those questions on them when they're presented. Maybe some we should add to our design docs, Desiree, is
you're right.
Who are the recipients? Who's going to use this? And you know what, by the way, not only who's going to use it, but who's going to be impacted by this? And it might be by department, it might be by end user, but those are great things to add to that, to get them thinking about who's involved and where they're at. The other thing I like at the top is the cost of not doing the mod. I always use the whys. My team used to call them the 5 whys, but I would say why. They would get so mad at me. They'd tell me why they wanted to do something. I said, well, why? And then they'd give me some more information. I said, well, why? And I really made them work to come up with that. And sometimes it'd be like, well, go figure it out and come back when you know why. What's the reason? What's it going to do for us? Why are we going to do this? Why does that make sense?
Can you put a monetary value on the why, though, too? That's really, truly it. Because if you're talking 25 hours of development time versus, 5 minutes a week, I don't know. So
True. Value is there as well, but sometimes it would come back. It wasn't even monetary. It wasn't money. It was stress on the job, kind of. Sometimes I couldn't put a dollar amount on it. It wasn't going to be actual like labor hours or sales dollars that came back from a modification, but it was the frustration of a department to get something done. And that changed the world for them. And so it was in a different form of return on investment, but just as important is, I'm not losing employees every other week because they're pulling their hair out trying to do their job.
that's a good point too. There's a non-monetary aspect of it. Yeah. And then our favorite, Holly, we've done a whole webinar on this one, assemble a project team. If the demand, if the size of the project in question warrants it, put together a project team. At a minimum, identify a company NAV or BC champion or subject matter experts for each department, someone who can take the time to answer the questions above, that can do the analysis of the current process, evaluate the cost of not making the change, or evaluate, user satisfaction, and just identifying the overall cost of it.
Yep. How many groups and sessions I've sat in over the years, and that's the biggest conversation will end up being around testing. Oh, getting people to test, getting testing done, it's so time consuming. That costs us more time and money than anything is the testing. Whether it's on a small modification, a report, or a large scale implementation, but it seems to be an issue. And when you can assemble this team, you get somebody to be the champion in each department. Identify your departments and who's going to be your NAV champion. Somebody, you're going to give them a little extra time to get on the NAV community and train, get on some of the webinars with Inovia and train, or just do special training for them in general with the partners. Right. But, identify them, give them some empowerment. They have a list of processes that when something comes through this modification, you just send out that team an email and say, hey, we have a new modification, run your processes. And they just email back going like, yep, I'm good, everything works. It reduces that amount of training time and the frustration. It puts someone in every department aware of what's changed, what's happened. So if something does come up, they have that information. They know, hey, they made this change and quite possibly it's causing the error we're seeing now or the issues we're running into. And it gives them ownership to then go train the rest of their team. It gives us a person that has that change process buy-in with us on that modification in each area to bring it to their team.
More buy-in, yeah.
Yep.
Fantastic. That's awesome. So how do we reduce the risk? And this is what that team or that subject matter expert would do too, is help, once they understand the process that they're looking for, can the current process that's been discussed, can it be changed? And, here's what we're used to hearing, and Holly, I'll let you chime in, but, no, it's been this way ever since I got here, and here's the whys. But why? Well, ever since because that's the way we've been doing it for years. Well, but why? Who says that, the same way we've been doing it for the last 50 years is the right way? And do we have access to the people who can help determine if our pricing structure has to be that complex? Let's get sales and accounting into the same room and talk about it. Just because it's been that way for years doesn't mean there's a different way to approach it.
Yeah, but I think the best way is really to meet either monthly or quarterly, depending on the size of your team and the things that they're bringing to the table, and have that discussion. They get to present what they'd like to see changed or modified. And then we leave that meeting. You go away from that meeting with the challenge of, okay, everybody go to the drawing board and now see, what can you find? Is there a way to do that without a modification? And the team will rally. They will get out there. They'll get on the community. They'll get out on YouTube. They'll Google. They'll find things, and they'll come back to the next meeting with ideas. And maybe those ideas will work, and we won't have to do a modification. Maybe it's an ISV that we then look at, and maybe we decide as a group, like, yeah, we all spun our wheels this month, and we couldn't find anything. We really need to do this. We need to move forward and figure out how we can make that work for the whole group.
Right. So the group would then, start looking for different base functionality or looking at ISVs. Is that what you kind of said?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, this is pretty much, the left side is what we're after, and the right side is kind of what we're saying to stay away from, right? The more requirement gathering that you do on the left side, and the more problem solving that happens within the business, your solution is, you get to a better solution and you spend a lot less time and money on that solution, whereas if you start with a concept on the right side, and then you use the whole time to try to find the solution and you're spinning your wheels, I think that's just not the way to go about it. So more time spent up front means a clear goal and a clear resolution to your goal. So,
and a smaller solution has less of an impact.
It does. It does.
You want to be precise with that. I think that's a great infographic.
Right. Yeah, I guess it sort of just brings it home, right? I can go back to it, and it just drives it home. You do spend a lot more. The solution is probably even a lot less coding, a lot less lines of code, a lot less frustration, a lot less everything, right? Because you've kind of put that effort into the requirement gathering and problem solving.
Yeah, so. and every developer has been in both of these situations, and it's not a good feeling when you get part of the way through development and you uncover something, or you realize you should have been doing it differently from the start. Well, you need that information up front.
Or you get a really vital piece of information, that nugget of information somewhere in the middle over here after a lot of lines of code have been written, and then you get a nugget of information and you go, oh, we got to do it some other way.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, either right, and it either manifests itself as, oh, I have to throw this work out and start again, or maybe we can keep going down the route we're going down, but it's not as efficient as it would have been if we had all this information from the start.
Right. Good point. All right. We want the mod. What's next? What do we do? Well, formulate your team or your subject matter expert. We've driven that home a great deal. And then document your requirements, and you don't need your partner for this. You just need your project team or subject matter expert. And what I like is, you've already also done the why. We know the cost of not doing it. But what is it? What is it that this mod's going to do? What areas is it going to impact? What does the end result look like? What kind of data will we be creating or affecting? And be specific with those requirements, even if it's just a quick brainstorming session initially. But if you can't articulate what the functionality is going to look like, or how it acts, or what data it produces, a consultant can't articulate it either. And therefore, we have to explain that to a Daniel, who then has to take what we say and turn it into reality. So the more what you can define, the better off the bottom line will be for you. So
right.
And then we've talked about the how. How do you make sure you get what you want? Those test scripts. Make those test scripts. Because as you're brainstorming on the what, you're formulating, the how to get what you want part by at least a checklist of areas that are impacted, processes that are going to need to be tested. You know what I mean? So and I do want to just call out here too. Daniel, when you test for something that you've coded, what are you normally testing for? Exactly what you've coded for. And I do the same.
Right. We're not doing user acceptance testing or end user testing. We're doing, does the code make it from A to Z successfully with the result they're looking? Yes.
Right.
And
stability testing.
And then it's up to them to make sure there's user acceptance testing and there's end user testing, and that it works for everybody in the company. It doesn't break anything down the road. Now we're ready to move it to production.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, a lot of times I'll even debug through the code I just wrote, and my testing will be, you know, hey, is this code doing what the design document was looking for? You know, and I mean, the application consultants have a better understanding of the user processes than I do,
Right.
but the users have a better understanding of their company's specific processes. So
and the caveats, you know, the caveats, the gotchas, the exceptions, that one customer that always bends the rules, and that process has to work for them too. You know,
right?
Those are the scenarios that I can't test for. So, and then lastly, obviously, you know, when do you need it by? Is there a time frame? Is there some seasonality to it? Is there a new acquisition coming up, changing of offices and stuff like that? So, you know, really, again, the clearer your vision, the better the result's going to be.
Yeah. And there should be a time frame for testing.
Oh, yes.
I try to remind our customers that every day it sits in test is another day you're not having return on investment. So every day that it sits in test, you're losing money because you're not getting return on investment with something that's now complete from our side. So, you know, keeping that before them, you know, keeps them from letting it sit there for months at a time because they're busy. You know, okay, you're busy, but you're losing money because it's waiting for you to test and get it into live. So, and maybe you'll be a little less busy if we get this into live for you. It's generally something that's going to help them get things done quicker.
Help the bottom line.
Automation.
Right. 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 So what do we do after the mod's finished? Guess what the most important thing is, you know, for all the reasons we've already discussed, but usually there's not a lot of budget left to do it, or, you know, the users are so tired of the project that they want to go back to their daily work. You know, the documentation, you know, that just has to be a must because it comes in handy for those upgrades, the re-implementations. Even when you change partners, if you ever change partners, it comes in handy. If you've got new users, new employees, it really is just a very important piece of the puzzle that gets sort of lost in the shuffle. And then, you know, once you do have that documentation, create the list of all your significant mods and revisit it regularly, because you're going to want to purge the ones that you don't use.
Right.
You know?
Right.
And I think that just keeps your system streamlined.
Right. And it can be as simple as a file folder that you keep those design docs in for all your modifications.
Yep.
Yeah, some of the biggest issues I've run into have been caused by modifications that aren't even used anymore.
And it's code that you're having to hop over, and
it's code you have to hop over. It's not, you know, maybe the setups were done a decade ago, but nobody's using it anymore. It's worth the time to keep things streamlined, because once you get to the point where your system is, you know, there's the programming term spaghetti code, when everything is intertwined. You get the system from Microsoft and it's neat and tidy and nice for the most part. And you know, you modify and you modify and you modify, and if you don't ever take anything back out, you're on a one-way street, you know.
It's kind of a slippery slope.
Right.
And what a perfect time for user documentation. You've created a change to a process, perfect time to create the test script for them to walk through those steps, and then utilize that as the new process documentation for that group. Another great opportunity is to look at ClickLearn, you know, another add-on to the product that you can utilize to help create those documents, create test scripts, create process documentation for each department. And you know, if you want help in something that is a little bit more fancy, you know, look at ClickLearn and bring that into the system and utilize that for some of those things.
Yeah, and you know what I've started using too lately is there's that Snagit, you know, the tools that we use to sort of take real quick screen captures and stuff. I'll use it. It's got a record button too. I'll use it just to record, you know, click here, go here, do this. It records my voice outside of my computer plus the screen that I'm on and all the clicks that I make. And that's a real, you know, quick way of doing it. Not as pretty, but.
Yeah, well, and everybody that has a Windows computer has a steps recorder built right in. They don't even need special programs or software to do that.
Right.
You into your search steps recorder, it comes up and it creates, it'll record the steps that you're taking and create a document out of it. So something that's right there, simple and easy, right in their system without adding anything to it.
Cool. All right. Well, ta-da, that's it. I want to open it up to everybody if you guys have any questions, but then also, you know, Holly and Daniel, are there any, you know, final words of wisdom in your experience that you can share with everybody? You know, because we're not saying don't do it, we're just saying consider how you do it.
Yeah, exactly. Consider how you do it. Just give a lot of weight to documentation and, you know, 5 years down the line, think of what you need to know.
Yeah, yeah. I always go back to the same, from my days on the client side to working with our clients now is, you know, is there a way we can do this in the ERP today? Can we find a solution within the product? If we can't, can we find an ISV that can make that happen for you? If we can't find an ISV that can make it happen for you, then what's going to be the cleanest, neatest way to do a customization to get you to your end result, to see success? What is that? What does success look like? And then go backwards from what success looks like and build it backwards into what they need to have and what has to happen. And then again, you know, just going back to working with the team. It can't be a one-person decision. It's got to be team related. It's got to, you know, be talked through in the departments. Is this going to affect you? Is this going to change something in your process and something in what you're working? And I've seen things go very, very awry with people where they've made decisions and then after they've implemented it 6 months down the road, found out it created some serious issues for other departments within their company that they had to then make corrections and fix and then ultimately get rid of that modification.
Gotcha.
Heard horror stories.
Right. Learn from us, right? Learn from
exactly
some of the experiences that we've had. So I'm going to open it up, see if anybody has any questions.
I have unmuted everyone, so for those who would like to call out your question, go ahead and click your microphone and fire away.
You guys are all just scrambling for your mic, right?
I think we must have just covered everything.
It's right next to your name on the left-hand side. If you would like to go ahead and ask the team a question, feel free. Or you can type it into the questions box.
Des, you did a great job.
Well, I was
together.
watching the questions box the whole time too. So, well,
a lot of information to take away. I think it was very helpful.
It is. It is. Yeah. So thank you everybody for your time and attention today. Don't forget to visit the Inovia Events website for all of our upcoming webinars and anything else you might be interested in. Lots of opportunities to learn.
All right, well, it doesn't look like any questions have come through. If anyone does think of something later on, feel free to reach out to your account manager at Inovia Consulting or Des or one of the support people here at Inovia, and they would be happy to go further in your questions. So I just want to thank Des, Daniel, Holly for presenting today, and to everyone on the webinar, or if you're watching on demand, thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Angie. It's been fun as always.
You're welcome. And just to let you know, we do have more webinars for you. Tomorrow we have Dynamic Web presenting at 1 p.m. Central, and they are going to be presenting on advanced e-commerce with Business Central, unlocking new online revenue channels. And on Thursday at 1 p.m. Central, we have Sana Commerce, and Alyssa will be presenting on diversify your revenue streams with an online sales channel. So check out our website for more of our upcoming events, and that's inovia.com/events. Have you heard our podcast yet? It's called the Inovia Conversation, and we just want to encourage you to listen to our selection that our hosts Steve Waltz and Jeff Progolski have provided to us. Holly and I believe her team have one of the podcasts that they have done recently, so check that out. You can find out about all the different podcast platforms to listen to on our podcast page, and that's inovia.com/podcast. So check out that selection and subscribe so you'll be notified when those new episodes air. And fall is here, and that means conference time in our environment. Inovia Consulting is proud to be a premier sponsor for Community Summit, which is a virtual event this year, coming up October 7th through the 9th. Community Summit is the annual gathering for all NAV and Business Central users and supporters, regardless of your experience level. And it is full of great sessions to help you develop leadership skills, improve NAV, BC skills, and so much more. So check out our conference page, and that's inovia.com/conferences for more details and how you can save on your summit registration. All right, well, thank you again, everyone, for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you soon on another Inovia webinar. Have a great week, everyone.